Right, now let's turn to this conversation. The economic freedom fighters presented their manifesto to the electorate on Saturday at Mabhida Stadium in a hotly contested KwaZulu-Natal province. The Red Berets say they will end the persistent load shedding, which has recently plunged the country into long hours of power outages within 6 months if voted into power. EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu is joining us in studio for more on that. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much for having us.
I'm sure it's been a grueling couple of months for you, not just the weekend. I mean, I believe you have been in that province for an extended period.
Yes, it has been an interesting period to be working with all the structures and all the regions of KwaZulu-Natal. But what makes the work much more exciting is the EFF is receiving proper support and is getting very good reception in all the regions, literally from Umkanyako, the region in Mhlaba-Lingane, until Heregola region in Kokstad. So we have been doing very well. The people of KwaZulu-Natal, particularly young people, are responding positively to the messages of the economic freedom fighters.
3 political parties launching their manifestos in KwaZulu-Natal. Well, what is with this province? It looks like it's a battleground for the 2024 local elections.
Yeah, it is a highly contested province. Generally, even the 2024 elections are highly contested. All the credible polls are pointing to the fact, which is going to be reality, that the ruling party is going to definitely go below 40% of the electorate in South Africa. So a lot of people, of course, have got interest as to what should happen moving forward. So majority of South Africans have already demonstrated in the 2021 local government elections that they do not want the ANC to remain in power. So if we were to aggregate the number of votes that the ANC received in the 2021 local government elections, it's far below 50%. So majority of the people of South Africa are saying the ANC must pack its bags and leave political power, because for the 30 years that they've been given the political power, they've been unable to transform it into economic power. They've been unable to empower majority of our people. They've been unable to transform the economy. They've been unable to stabilize government. They've been unable to build sustainable and durable infrastructure. They've been unable to keep the lights on. They've been unable to give water to our people.
Yeah.
So now the 30 years is literally, these elections are elections that are going to say farewell to the former liberation movement in power. So that is why, of course, this becomes a highly contested elections. So a lot of parties, more than 360 parties have registered, because they can see that the ANC is crumbling into permanent insignificance.
Yeah. Interesting, you bring this question of polls. How seriously do you take these polls? Because, I mean, if we were to look at those latest ones as you were going out to launch your manifesto, they are indicating, as you say, ANC below 50%. They are indicating yourselves still third, but very close to the Democratic Alliance, up about to 15%. I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Compared to the outcomes of what we saw in the by-election in Abakulusi, because you've been there, you've been on the ground. How do you relate the two?
So if you were to gauge the Ipsos polls, so you can literally go and check historically what have been the predictions of Ipsos for all the elections from 2014, 2019, 2021, their margin of error is almost less than 2%. Like their predictions are almost exact in terms of what happened. And the latest poll, by the way, are not giving us 15%, they're giving us 19%.
Yeah.
Which decidedly will make us bigger than the Democratic Alliance. We are going to be either number 1 or number 2 in South Africa's elections after the 2024 May elections. We hope that the elections are going to take place in May, so that it's a full term. So the polls are already speaking to what we are observing on the ground, that a substantial number of the people are beginning to convert and beginning to have the faith and believe in the economic freedom fighters. We definitely are going to do very well in these elections. We're definitely going to be either number 1 or number 2 in the upcoming elections. And our aim and the election strategy that we're working on and the plan that we're working on is to get a decisive majority. Yeah. And we know that if that doesn't happen, we'll definitely settle on the sky on the stars.
I want you to tell me what that would actually mean.
We're aiming for the moon, and if we don't reach the moon, we're definitely going to settle on the stars.
Tell you what that means. But let's compare that to the outcome of Bakulu's. Right? If you look at the contesting parties, AFP was 35% previously, they went 47%. ANC also went up from 15% to 31%. You're the only ones who dropped from 5% to 1%. But there's a factor that came in here. Yes. MK was contesting this and they got 19%.
So the by-elections are actually very important elections for local levels, but they are not a good reflection of the national vote or even provincial votes. By-elections are won due to the local dynamics and who is the candidate and what is obtaining at that particular moment. They've never been a gauge of the national mood in terms of elections. You can't sense the pulse of elections and the pulse of a province because of the by-elections. And of course, they are very important to always participate in terms of what is expected. But they are not a better measure of what will be the feeling of what gets to happen. And then, of course, we did not admittedly, we did not pay maximum attention in the Abatulu's by-election, and which we are going to do because we were, all of us, consumed with the preparations for the rally and mobilizing all the resources and getting all the 4,973 voting stations and districts in KwaZulu-Natal to bring volunteers to the rally of the EFF from all the 901 wards of KwaZulu-Natal. So we had maximal attention in all the sub-regions and the wards and everything else. We had not paid maximum attention. And of course, that picture is going to change with the upcoming by-elections that are going to take place in Newcastle, in Pongolo, and in other areas in KwaZulu-Natal where by-elections have been declared. But we are on a proper trajectory. We are cruising very nicely.
So I heard one analyst saying that the EFF must not underestimate the MK factor. And certainly from these numbers, it looks like they could have had some kind of effect.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of political parties are going to obviously ask for people to vote for them, including the MK party, like it will ask for people to vote for them. But so far, there is no evidence, none whatsoever, that the MK is going to perform better than the EFF, including in KwaZulu-Natal. They are still rising. There is still the excitement in terms of the work that they are doing, and a lot of people are still trying to find expression. And our observation, which is a fair observation, is that a lot of people who are going to the MK party come from the ANC. I mean, MK was announced last year, December, and when we went back to the ground in January as the EFF, we have not lost a single member in the EFF. You know, we've got branch coordinators and conveners of elections. We've got VD conveners and coordinators of elections. Our structure is still intact in the entire province. Not a single person has said they're leaving the EFF to join MK party, but it's happening to the ANC. Those ones who were fired, like they were fired even before MK was formed, and then those ones, they can join whatever party they wish to join, and they're not our responsibility at all. So we are not bleeding because of MK. The party that is bleeding because of MK is the ANC, because in any way the MK is the real ANC, so we don't know. So their own issues which they must handle themselves. It doesn't affect us. We know what we're doing. We know our agenda, and we know that our agenda is going to result in total and convincing clear victory in these upcoming elections.
So I'm asking that also in view of your statement. Say we'll aim for the moon, failing which we'll hit the stars, right? Yes. And if you are number 2, we're going to get into your manifesto. It's long. Yeah. I'm not even going to attempt to say I read all of it. Some of the points are like 70 points. I mean, it's a lot. But I'm going to try and pick a couple of issues that I think we can discuss. But if you are indeed going to, for example, have the kind of amendments that will enable your manifesto to do what you say it requires to do, you're going to need that decisive majority.
Yes.
And if you're number 2, clearly you will not be able to do that.
Yeah, look, there are issues which, the manner and the nature of how politics and political work happens in South Africa is that you must always stand for principle. You must always be firm on what you believe in. So you must check all our election manifestos from 2014, 2019. We always emphasize the centrality of land and jobs all the time, because at the center of the EFF's existence is the struggle to reclaim our land from the colonial settlers who continue to own more than 80% of South Africa's land currently. So that is what we are existing for. And we then, of course, then deal with the situation that South Africa is defined by chronic joblessness, which no government has been able to even scratch the surface of. Like, we've got more than 15 million people who are capable of working but cannot find any job anywhere. So we have to deal with that. Then our theme for this year's elections then becomes our land and jobs now stop load shedding, because there's a crisis currently of load shedding where a sitting government has destroyed the infrastructural capacity to generate adequate electricity for daily use, for use by people, by industry, and by public institutions. So that is our focus is on all of those issues. And then what happens after that is, if the electorate does not give you a decisive majority to bring back the land, to bring back or to bring jobs, to create millions of jobs sustainably for everyone, to stop load shedding, if the electorate doesn't give you an overwhelming mandate to do so, you still go to whoever has been elected as part of the other component to say that our manifesto is on land and jobs and stopping of load shedding, and this is what we plan to do. So the electorate must rest assured that whatever is the outcome of the 2024 elections, the EFF is going to fight for land and jobs, and is going to stop load shedding in whatever form possible. So we are never going to. You would know that even, by the way, before we were even increased to 44 in Parliament, we introduced the process, when we were 25 in the National Assembly, we introduced a motion to amend Section 25 of the Constitution, which led to a huge discourse in South Africa, and we almost found each other with the ruling party to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. There are so many battles, by the way, which we have got to record in terms of what happens. We have achieved insourcing of security guards and cleaners before we're even government. We've been able to influence a lot of policy discourses on just what has to be done differently, even before we're government. And that is what we actually outline in the manifesto of the EFF, because before we go into the details of our commitment, we then give a context of where do we come from as a movement. A movement which is just over 10 years has achieved a lot and will continue to inspire hope for majority of our people. So the people of South Africa must be rest assured that the EFF will continue to fight for their interest and for all the issues that are contained in our manifesto. We are asking for the outright majority. We are asking for the overwhelming support. If it doesn't happen, we are not going to insult the voters. We are not going to blame the voters. We are going to say maybe it will give us more time to grow the organization so that we are able to achieve all these aspirations, which are noble aspirations. And these are original aspirations. For the first time, we get to launch a manifesto even before the ruling party does, because we're not copycats. We're not trying to copy anyone. We are launching the manifesto with original ideas, well-researched ideas that are mostly expressions of the aspirations and interests of ordinary people on the ground, and then, of course, tested by scientific developments of what happens. In electricity, for instance, we have the Commander-in-Chief was saying yesterday in our list conference that we got to assemble some of the best engineers here in South Africa. Actually, most of them who, when they were leading in ESCOM, there was no load shedding in South Africa. So we know how load shedding will be ended in South Africa. It's only the EFF that can end load shedding, because we know what the problem is and what the solutions should be.
I suppose maybe the ruling party also knows what the problem is, but the question is whether or not they are willing to do what is required to fix it.
No, look, the ruling party is extremely confused. They speak multiple things. They've got multiple diagnoses of just what is happening in ESCOM. So if you were to isolate even those elected officials of the ANC, you ask Ramaphosa what is the problem with electricity, he will tell you something different. Paul Mashatile will tell you something different. Sputler will just speak a lot of English,
exactly.
and then they tell you something different.
Indicating that I suppose the problem is more political than it is technical.
They've got multiple interpretations of just what is happening. I mean, like Mbalula was saying, this load shedding is because of sabotage. Some people are sabotaging the infrastructure and everything else. But if you were to go and ask Ramaphosa, is there sabotage now? He will say no. Because they've got different diagnoses. And if they've got different diagnoses, it means they cannot come with a common cure. They cannot come with a common solution as to what is to be done. They've been making commitments and promises throughout that load shedding will end. I mean, like, I heard on social media, because we didn't attend the sauna, that Ramaphosa was saying they are about to end load shedding.
And then it's about to be a thing of the past.
And so immediately the next day there was 36 already. So you can see they are hopeless. These people are hopeless.
I wanted to come there because these are some of the things that are happening. Before we get into the manifesto, that of course, I doubt it will be a response to the SONA, because your manifesto would have been written, I'm sure, a long time ago. But I suppose some of the things that you would be challenging within your manifesto is what the ANC says they've achieved in the 30 years. And what do you make of the Tinsolo story?
I actually have never got to pay attention to the Tinsolo story. I don't know what is Tinsolo and what is happening with Tinsolo and everything else. What I know is that majority of young people in South Africa are hopeless because they are jobless, and there's no possibility that they're going to get any jobs under the current government. I know that a lot of people continue to lose their jobs because there's no stability of energy supply in South Africa. I know that a lot of infrastructure is collapsing. The wastewater systems are collapsing all over South Africa. The water treatment works are collapsing all over South Africa. There's nothing that is happening. The rail projects, the rail infrastructure in South Africa has collapsed totally. There are no dependable trains that are transporting people for long distances in South Africa. Everything else that has happened under the ANC government even got to collapse the mega infrastructure which was built by apartheid for apartheid purposes. So what I know, I don't know about Tinsolo, but I know for the fact that the lives of our people are not improving under the ANC government. If anything, things are getting worse in terms of what the ANC has got to demonstrate. And if the ANC is not stopped, this country is going to collapse. It's possible for countries to collapse into nothing. It happened with so many countries, inclusive of Zimbabwe, because of some of the issues which we have made diagnosis of before, inclusive of so many countries in the African continent, Malawi. A lot of countries have got to go backward over time. So it's not guaranteed that when time progresses, the country will make progress forward. It's possible that time can progress and everything else goes backward. And that is what the ANC is doing. It's taking us on a reverse gear to nowhere. And that is what we have to stop. And we are appealing on the people of South Africa to now consciously. The young people must know that if we continue to have the ANC in government, we're going to have a bigger crisis. I can give you a simple example that, how do you explain the fact that at a fiscal management level, fiscal policy management level, you have got a state which expends upward of 380 billion on debt service costs. So the biggest expenditure item on government's budget now is to pay for debts. Just interest of debts of more than 5 trillion rands, which is owed. And those are obligatory. You cannot move away from that because you downgrade the country into nothing if you try to move out of that. And the debt situation is not improving because the economy is not growing. The only way to resolve the debt crisis in South Africa is to grow the economy. The economy is not growing. There is no clear plan on how we're going to develop the productive forces so that we can be able to collect maximum revenue to settle the debt crisis that South Africa is facing. And what does the increase in debt mean? It means potentially the state will be unable to spend on important social services and obligations such as education, as healthcare, even on these social protection measures that they always pride themselves on of social grants. they are going to disappear if the ANC continues to be in power, because they soon will be paying upward of 500 billion annually on servicing debts which they've created out of mismanagement of the economy, out of the inability to grow the economy much more sustainably, to then take care of all the people of South Africa. So the ANC is dangerous to society.
That's a very good point for us to take a break, because when we come back, I want to talk to that exactly, right? Yes. And the promises that you're making versus what we are collecting versus what you say you will do by 2026, and whether or not it's able to happen. Deputy President of the EFF, Floyd Shivambu, staying with us. We're talking land, we're talking jobs, and we're talking load shedding, which is, of course, their motto for these 2024 elections. You can weigh in on the conversation, 072-110-5584. Send us your messages on X at Newzroom 405. We're back in a moment. Economic Freedom Fighters presented their manifesto to the electorate this past weekend at Mabhida Stadium in KwaZulu-Natal. Hotly contested province that. Red Berets are with us in the studio, represented by the Deputy President, Floyd Shivambu. So, right, let's get to it. Land, right?
Yes.
One of the statements, of course, says make the state a custodian of all South African land. It's not necessarily a new statement. It's what you've always been saying. But it's quite interesting. One of your MPs was speaking earlier on, and he's seemingly downplaying the title deeds thing. I know in our previous conversation you would have indicated that a title deed is important to be able to go to the banks and to be able to and so on exchange and get a loan and so on and so forth. He seems to be saying that thing is not necessarily important.
No, look, the land tenure rights of ordinary people will always be guaranteed under the EFF government. That once you have been allocated land for specific purposes, your land tenure will be guaranteed. What we have been saying persistently is that the state must be custodian of all of South Africa's land. Currently, the state is custodian of some parts of South Africa's land, like the forestry land, by the way, is under the custodianship of the state. So those who are involved in forestry businesses, they have to lease the land from the state to do that. They are guaranteed land tenure.
Yeah.
All the land where the special economic zones are and the industrial development zones are, in Kucha, in East London Development Zone, in Dube Trade Port in Durban, in Richards Bay, IDZ, in Saldanha Bay, all the IDZ, in Musina's Industrial Development Zone, all of that land is under the ownership and custodianship of the state. And that is the land that, by the way, is receiving majority of investments, like foreign direct investments. Although it's meager, it's minimal in terms of the impact that we need to have in terms of industrial development. Yeah. So the state can be custodian of land. The reason why we are taking the route of custodianship of the state is because the attempts for 30 years now to redistribute or to reclaim the land piece by piece has never shown any progress. It has never shown any progress. That, like, you know, in 1994's manifesto of the ANC, there was a commitment to redistribute 80% of the land by 1999. Yeah. And then when 1999 arrived, they shifted the goalpost to 2004. 2004 arrived, they shifted the goalpost to 2009. All the time, 30 years later, the land that was reclaimed from the white colonial settlers is less than 10% in South Africa. What does that mean? It means for you to redistribute or to reclaim 30% of the land, you will need 100 years. At the pace that the ANC is going now on land reclamation and land redistribution.
But so the most of that, people are saying people were given land and they sold it again because they wanted the money. They didn't really want the land.
No,
they were given the land, they took it, and they're like, we can sell this, take the money, and move back into other areas.
When the state is custodian of all the land, such practices are easy to manage, because we say that here is land that is given to you for these particular purposes. If it's given for agricultural purposes and you do not do anything agricultural about it, it must be allocated to someone else who's going to do agricultural something about it. Yeah. That is what it should be, in a properly legislated and legal manner, so that there is proper use. The state already has got custodianship of certain parts of South Africa's land, and it is utilized much more meaningfully. Actually, the most productive land that gets to be used for the development of the economy is under the custodianship of the state. So it's not something which is drastically different. And by the way, in the constitutional amendment process which we engaged in Parliament, we had agreed amongst ourselves that we should say that the state is custodian of all of South Africa's land. Then we'll then come with the redistribution and who has which rights in terms of the land allocation performances that have to be performed by traditional leaders, by the local state, by provincial government, by national government as well, by the defense system. So those aspects will be dealt with through the detailed legislation. But our position,
what you're saying
our
is that
position
people shouldn't listen to our conversation and say by May, if EFF is number one, they not all of a sudden going to wake up and saying, well, your title deed is no longer worth anything. Land rights use.
Land tenure will always be guaranteed. We have never caused confusion about that because we are fully aware that a government can abuse its custodianship if you do not guarantee land tenure. If you do not say to people that this land that you have been given to utilize is guaranteed it's going to be utilized by you for a certain, particularly residential purposes, that must be guaranteed so that there is no confusion about it. Someone says, no, because I'm custodian, I'm going to take your land and all of those things. It doesn't work like that. Land tenure will always be guaranteed under an EFF government. And that point we have made abundantly very clear in our submissions in the constitutional reform. That is why in the manifesto, we actually repeat how the Constitution should read like and the details of just how the Constitution is going to look like, particularly in Section 25, which deals with the property rights.
Why do you say may and not must?
Look, those are semantics, of course, which have to be looked into. And we have dealt with the legalities of that in the Constitutional Review Forum. And by the way, a bigger number of ANC, even the people who were brought in by the ANC to negotiate on the wording of the documents, were fully agreed. We actually had bilaterals here in Johannesburg with the delegation of the ANC where they agreed fully. Except some sellouts within the ANC later on went to mobilize Ramaphosa to say, we can never agree with the EFF on anything. Let's leave this thing, let's rather go and vote against each other in Parliament. And part of the people who disrupted that agreement which was reached with elders of the ANC, Sandile Nogina, the former DG of Mineral Resources, they brought elders of the ANC to come and negotiate a proper phrasing. We had agreed amongst ourselves. But the people who want to disrupt that includes sellouts like Lamula, like the Minister of Justice, who is always clowning around without knowing what he's doing. But then agreement had been reached amongst ourselves as to the phrasing. And the phrasing which we repeat here is what we had agreed amongst ourselves as to just how do we deal with the land question. And that was going to be a very important foundation for the legislative reforms that we're going to now bring back South Africa's land for the benefit of everyone. And then, of course, land reclamation must be accompanied later on by those who are going to be utilizing it for agricultural purposes, must be given the agricultural implements. But at the center of that, there has to be a commitment of off-take of all the agricultural products which are produced by small-scale farmers. I mean, the state, by the way, is the single biggest buyer of food in society, in any system. Like if you've got school feeding schemes, hospitals, prisons and all of those. Once you guarantee that, we're going to guarantee off-take from small-scale agricultural practitioners and farmers. Then you've got an economy that is quite expansive, that is going to empower millions of our people. That is why, as part of our jobs commitment, we detail just how the state's buying power is going to be utilized to empower small-scale agriculture. That is going to create a lot of jobs for our people. Currently, we have opened up our systems to import a lot of food, even the food which we've got internal capacity to could produce here in South Africa. And that is what we're going to change.
I'm going to come to that on local beneficiation in a moment. Let's go back to the land. You mentioned land administration as one of the areas. Now you've been in KwaZulu-Natal, and I'm sure you know how important this land administration powers conversation is between traditional leaders and municipalities. What are you proposing? But also I see you're saying do away with Section 235 of cultural autonomy. which is going to be a big issue.
So, do you know, in KwaZulu-Natal, there's a very unique situation that happened as part of the CODESA concessions and negotiations. So, just before elections, like then apartheid president F.W. de Klerk, I think 3 days, literally 3 days before elections, before the 27th of April 1994, he proclaimed the Ingonyama Trust Act to establish the Ingonyama Trust Board, which was effectively transferring all the land that belonged to the KwaZulu homeland into the Ingonyama Trust Board, with the sole custodianship being Isilo Samabandla. So whoever is an incumbent king is become the custodian of that trust, or the main trustee of that trust. But now the deeper legislative component of it, Ingonyama Trust Board and the Ingonyama Trust belongs to the Department of Rural Development in South Africa.
Yeah.
So the entirety of that land, whoever can say what, the entirety of the KwaZulu land is under the custodianship of the state currently.
Yeah. And
then the
Prime Minister stood up recently and he said, is it right that the land of the king
so then
is
then the issue of how that land is administered is then given to the traditional leadership. But the land is under the custodianship of the state currently, as things stand. That is what gets to happen. And of course, there are issues which the royal family is raising as to how do we then get to deal differently. Because I saw the statement from Isilo saying that perhaps the minister's role in the custodianship of the land must be removed, that the royal family must have exclusive administrative rights over the land which belongs to Ingonyama Trust. So it's one of the issues that, of course, must be looked into. And once we have got this custodianship of all of South Africa's land, we must be able to define what then becomes the role of traditional leaders. We actually outline a simple principle that in majority of cases, there's an anomaly that is committed by traditional leaders of refusing to give land to females, where like females are discriminated against. Like so, women are not given land by majority of traditional leaders, and that has to stop. And sometimes there is allocation of same piece of land to different people. Like they say, no, here is your land. You exchange whatever you exchange with them, and then tomorrow they give someone else the same piece of land, and people end up in conflict. So there must be common principles as to what role should traditional leaders play in the administration and distribution of land. We will not advocate, by the way, as the EFF, for a regime, a land regime that cuts off the traditional leaders from the administration of land rights and land use purposes and land use processes. Because if you say that traditional leaders completely do not have any say in land issues and land affairs, you have effectively abolished traditional leadership. Because traditional leadership is land controlled, so they must have a role to play that we think this portion must be utilized for economic development, this one must be used for agriculture, this one must be used for recreational purposes, this one for school. They must have a say in the areas which they are governing in terms of just what has to happen. And then, of course, we will be able to, we'll listen to the proposal of what Isilo and the entire royal family is saying in relation to the management of Ingonyama Trust.
Let's take a break and read some of your WhatsApp messages when we return. 072-110-5584. When we come back, talk a little bit more about jobs. 1 degree, 1 job, and how they plan to do all this, including, of course, the question on beneficiation, as I mentioned. Stay with us. Back live with you, EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu with us still. And thank you for your messages. We'll get to them in just a moment. But I wanted us to touch on this right quickly. You mentioned beneficiation as part of the points that you're mentioning in terms of job creation.
Yes.
Beneficiation is not a new idea. Since the New Growth Path has been there, with the NDP, beneficiation is still something that is being discussed. And much of the conversation is around, especially if we're talking minerals, It's the energy that's required to be able to process this. And currently we are looking at generation of 3.7%. And for us to be able to grow at that level, we need generation capacity to be at 16% to be able to promote and enhance the beneficiation of mineral commodities. I suppose your big challenge would then be to take care of the energy first. To be able to
Look, the most important thing that we have to deal with now is to stabilize the generation of electricity, but to also expand the transmission component of it as well. Like, we need to expand. There is an abundance of energy and electricity resources in South Africa. We've got abundance of coal. And we state clearly and unequivocally in our manifesto that we're not going to move away from coal as the primary source of electricity in South Africa. We're not going to destroy the infrastructure that has been built to generate electricity from coal. If anything...
But you're going to cancel all coal contracts and IPP contracts.
Yeah, the IPP contracts, majority of them are in a yet highly questionable wind and solar sources, which are intermittent, like meaning that you cannot know just how much electricity you will get from the sun. So the attempts to harvest electricity from the sun and from wind has not yet given dependable and reliable electricity supply anywhere in the world, by the way. So we still have to build the proper capacity and sustain coal as a base load energy source in South Africa. And then we even say that additional to that, we should maximally utilize nuclear as a source of energy. We must build a minimum of 6,000 megawatts additional capacity on nuclear. But also we must then get to look into the conversion of gas, like liquefied natural gas and natural gases into electricity. There's plenty of gas here in South Africa, but also in Mozambique. And that is why our developmental trajectory and program doesn't only focus within the borders of South Africa. We think that there's enough resources in the entire continent to could electrify the entire continent. If we were to complete the Inga Dam project for hydroelectricity, which is clean energy, you are guaranteed upward of 30,000 megawatts, which is plenty to could electrify the entire subcontinent in terms of the key areas that need electricity. So there are so many things that we speak to as to just how we're going to handle that. And then, of course, if you want to industrialize, you need to have stable and reliable supply of electricity. And that is what we're going to do. And this, we're not speaking rhetoric. We're not speaking wishes.
Yeah.
We're speaking things which, if we were to take power tomorrow, will go into action and there will be end of load shedding in South Africa. We can say that boldly because we have consulted properly on this as to just what is to be done to end load shedding, and we will end load shedding in South Africa.
So have you done empirical evaluation of the regional and local markets? Because that's the next thing. So you can get the energy. And who's going to buy the product?
I remember, so, I mean, like, our neighbors, Namibia possibly consumes less than 2,000 megawatts of electricity, which is what the city of Ekurhuleni consumes. Mozambique has got huge electricity potential, but possibly has got about, they need, like in the transmission lines that have been installed in Mozambique, they can only need about 1,200 to 1,500 megawatts to have their lights on and industry functioning. That's why I was saying earlier that we have to stabilize the generation of electricity and then expand on transmission capacity as well, so that we can have transmission that gets to connect everyone else who needs electricity much more sustainably. There's lots of industrial potential, there's lots of mining potential that is in the entire subcontinent, but because of lack of electricity, that is not being maximally utilized to benefit everyone. So if we build dependable and solid generation of electricity, whether we build it here in South Africa, of course we'll build it here in South Africa primarily because we've got abundance of coal resources and reserves that can last us for 400 years, by the way. And then we then explore the nuclear component, we then look into the gas to power capacity, then we build transmission capacity, then the entire subcontinent is going to collectively prosper and develop. That is what we're in pursuit of. That we're going to have common prosperity that is based on proper electricity, that is going to sustain everyone else's livelihoods. And we are capable of doing that. We are not theorizing. And we're not just talking out of
this, and then we'll get to the WhatsApps.
Yes.
It seems you're suggesting more SOEs, right? Housing and roads, 4 million jobs will be created, SOE. 1.2 million security, SOE. Cleaning services, SOE. Landscaping, SOE. Mining, SOE. Trading and retail platform, SOE. Including training institutions. And we're talking of rationalizing the current SOEs that we have.
So our economic development model as well is the one that is anchored on the centrality of the state to drive economic expansion and development. And we obviously and purposefully are saying that there are certain things that the state must perform directly itself. Instead of the currently inhuman system where you go and hire a security company at 15,000 rand per worker. But that company that you've hired gives the worker 2,000 rand. Most of the time in envelopes, without a pay slip, without any benefits. If they are sick, they don't get paid anything. They don't have any protection service. So we are saying that let us get to insource the security guards and then let's create a state institution. So you don't have to say, let's take SAPS to go and guard state assets. You can have a structure that is responsible for looking after state assets, inclusive of buildings, of the infrastructure that has to be looked after by security guards. But that must be done internally with decent pay for security guards. Because what is currently happening is just inhuman. Majority of security companies have not registered their workers with the unemployment insurance fund. They don't have pension funds. They don't have any recognition as employees. Meaning that if they retire, even if they work for 40 years, they will not have anything. That is inhuman. And that is applicable as well to gardeners and all the basic things which government needs to deal with on a daily basis. Cleaners. We should insource the cleaners. We have already started doing that in areas where we've got influence in the city of Johannesburg. And there is practical changes in the lives of the people. People who used to be paid 3,500 are now paid 10,000 rand with proper protection. We have been championing this agenda of insourcing even in universities, in many other areas where we've got relevance, because it's the only human thing to do. Why would you want to give some middleman the salary of a person, that person only delivers 10% of what was given initially? It's outrightly immoral.
Let's quickly read some WhatsApp messages, and I'm sure some of them you would expect the kind of reaction is what you get on Twitter in any case. So I promise pensioners 4,000 if you're acknowledging that government is relying on debt to maintain social services. Let's take another one. Good evening. I think it's time to give EFF a chance. The ANC has failed dismally. Let's go on. Ask Floyd why they prefer illegal foreign nationals versus South Africans who vote for them by not supporting the security of informal and small businesses for South Africans like spaza shops in their manifesto.
Look, there's the issue about, so do you know, the social protection system that we propose as the EFF is that it must have the necessary impact, and it must also ignite local economic activities and growth. And we purposefully are going to take care of people that cannot take care of themselves. This is the elderly and children. So those who they can't do anything like this, they can't work, they can't, and then we'll create jobs for those that are capable of working. Maximal employment. And that is going to happen through the development and growth of the productive forces, the growth of the economy. So if anything, we are not going to aim to increase the number of social grants recipients as the EFF. We are going to look into increase the number of people who have got jobs so that they do not depend on social grants. So if you have got fewer people who are depending on social grants because you have got jobs, it means you are then able to then give meaningful income or grant to the elderly and children. That is why we are proposing the doubling of the social grants to the elderly and children.
Right.
That is the purposeful thing that we are then dealing with. Because we know that we have created jobs for the people who are now just given grants and otherwise they were supposed to be working.
Quick one.
It's one of the issues that we have to deal with much more.
The local economy.
The
local economy.
So look, yeah, we have to protect. We must give everyone an equal opportunity to play in that space. And do you know, majority of our people do not have access to these distribution centers, like these areas that got to supply bulk groceries to the spaza shops. Majority of our people do not have access to that. They do not have bulk infrastructure. They do not have basic infrastructure to locally trade. We as the EFF are going to purposefully empower those who want to start small businesses, give them subsidies, and make sure that they are able to trade equally and in a very competitive way, so that those who say that I don't want to wake up every morning to take a taxi to go and work elsewhere, I want to do my own businesses here, they must be permitted to do that, and we are going to give them the strategic support that is required. The issue of migration is an issue which we have dealt with several times before that. Migration is definitive of every sphere of society, of history. You can go to anywhere in the world. Migration is a reality. In London, in the United Kingdom, there's 1 million South Africans there who are staying there. Majority, actually, the government of London, local government, including the provincial and the national government, employ more than 100,000 South Africans. Direct employment in London, who are employed there. Yeah. Who are migrants, economic migrants in the United Kingdom. So migration always happens. The issue which
averse to protecting the local interests of South Africans.
So all these aspirations that we're giving you, the jobs that we're talking about, the land that we're saying must be given, is primarily for South Africans. This manifesto is for the people of South Africa.
You know that it's about the one area where you are very clear. It's on land ownership. You say land ownership to foreigners. That one definitely will be protected.
So the entire manifesto is, but we as the EFF can't join a band of the inhumanity of saying you must deny people access to basic health care because they are here in South Africa and they do not have an ID document. That is inhuman. We can't be part of that. Where people are denied burial rights, they are denied access to health care. What rubbish is that? We can't be part of that. We are an organization that cares about the humanity of all our people. That is why, as part of our pillars, which is expatiated here in the election manifesto, is the development of the African economy. That let us develop the entire African economy. We speak about electricity, that let us have electricity the whole of the African continent. There's plenty of economic resources that, if we support each other, are going to develop all of us. We're going to achieve collective prosperity. So if you think that we must just focus within ourselves because of borders that were drawn by colonial settlers, then you do not have the humanity that defines.
I'm completely out of time. But here's a final question for you. Exciting stuff that you promised. If you read it, it's fantastic. By the way, get a chance to read all of it. There's a lot. We're not able to cover all of it. But the big question is, how are you going to fund this stuff? You're talking about swimming pools in every school, big fields, big pitches. You're talking about hiring more people. You're talking about training more police. You're talking, all these things are going to amount to the trillions of rands if you look at it, at least in the next 2 years.
Yeah, so in the manifesto, there is a chapter that deals with the fiscal and monetary framework as to just what is going to be the sources of the resources that we need. Like, one is that we should maximally and optimally collect revenue from all sectors of the economy. There is still a phenomenon of illicit financial flows in South Africa. We're losing billions of rands because particularly in the natural resources sector and mining, we're not maximally collecting revenue. Like, the amount of taxes that we collect from the entire mining sector can't finance the education of one province currently. Whilst we are the biggest producer of platinum group metals, we still produce gold, we still produce a lot of very useful industrial and precious minerals and metals. But there is no proper tax regime and system that gets to maximally collect revenue domestically. So we are going to first deal with that that let us maximally collect all the revenue that is due to us in terms of what happens. But also when you attract more investments, when you develop the economy, it means that you are expanding the revenue base as well. Right. Now, there's a lot of people are going to be paying taxes. So if you create million jobs, it's additional new taxpayers who are 1 million are going to increase these monies that are going to be utilized for the other commitments that we're talking about.
Completely.
So that is basically what we're dealing with. And we're going to do it very well. We are a government that knows what it stands for, and we're going to demonstrate to the people of South Africa that you can trust on us. We know what we're dealing with, and we're going to do it far much more efficiently.
Deputy President of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Floyd Shivambu, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.